Welcome back to another episode of Positively Uncensored, your favorite reality TV and interview podcast. Today, we're getting into the Ultimatum Season 3. Now, if you missed the first episode that I posted, I did do a brief recap of episode 1. And these episodes, I'm going to focus on the last half, episodes 2 through 5, so the last batch of episodes. So if you're not caught up yet, this is your reminder to go catch up because I will be spoiling the show for you. In these last batch of episodes, we see two separate couples get their sneak on, and we see Sandy ask JR if his name is JAWN. There's so much to unpack, so hold on to your hats. Getting into episode 2, the couples begin to go on dates. Nobody has selected each other yet, so they're first getting to know people. So we kind of get each other's vibes. Nick and Vanessa go on a date, and we learn that Dave made Vanessa quit bodybuilding even though she loved it. Now, we never hear the reasons as to why Dave made her quit bodybuilding. I will say Dave's on Instagram saying that his edit is misleading. Less than 1% of the truth was told based off of his edit. So there is some discrepancy there, but I would be willing to bet that Dave made Vanessa quit bodybuilding for physical reasons. That's typically what happens, so I wouldn't be surprised. However, I reached out to Dave and I asked him if I could interview him. So fingers crossed that I can make that happen because I would like to hear from him as well as from Vanessa what was going on there. Now on Nick and Vanessa's date, it's so weird, by the way. Let's just acknowledge, okay? Those are our hosts. Now there's a couple on the show that they host. We don't need another Nick and Vanessa. Immediately, I said no to them just based off of that alone. But in Nick's words, he thinks that Sandy doesn't appreciate him for his creativity or his quirkiness, and he often feels misunderstood. Nick says in his confessional that after talking with Vanessa, he doesn't know if he's going to be ready to be engaged anymore at the end of this. Now, fast forward through episode 4 and 5, we know that that is not the case. But initially, that's how Nick was feeling. Chanel and Dave go on a date. And I will say that I don't really think anybody was feeling Dave. And I think that Chanel was just being very sweet by entertaining him. On their date, they share their concerns about if their partners would be physically intimate while they're gone, because that would hurt them. And both of them have been in a relationship for 3 years. So they're sharing kind of this common feeling in the experience of feeling uneasy, being at the same point in their relationships. She was the one who issued the ultimatum. So I thought that it was interesting that Dave would even be interested in her. But it feels like they were going to be purely platonic anyways, which I said in my first recap. If we were to look at couples who were most likely to be platonic and potentially learn something from each other, I definitely thought that that would be Chanel and Micah, and then Micah and Mariah, and then Chanel and Dave. On Micah and Mariah's date, things start out cute. Like they talk about quirky things that they could learn about each other. Mariah shares that her parents divorced when she was 1 and that her mom was very protective during her childhood and that she has memories of like her cousins being able to go outside and ride her bike and she wasn't allowed to. And Micah had like the opposite upbringing, whereas he was given a lot of freedom and a lot of independence to explore. So, seemingly they could have both shared something to teach each other in this experience because they both had like completely opposite perspectives of the world because of their childhood. Now, just to say, Mariah's mom was a single mom, and I understand it seems like sometimes when you're a single mom and you want to keep things under control for your kids, sometimes you can like sneak into this like paranoid feeling. And I feel like Mariah's mom was trying to keep control over a situation that's hard to have control over. And she did that by keeping Mariah from going places. So it's like I understand how that happened, but I also understand how much Mariah missed out on because of that experience. Caleb and Aria go on a date, and he talks to Aria about how his biggest insecurity in his past relationship. First of all, it's so weird that they call each other exes during this entire experience because they're supposedly going back to one another, or at least they'll be back together for 3 weeks. We have no idea if they'll ultimately stay together, but it's weird that they call each other exes. But his biggest insecurity with his ex, Mariah, is that he won't be able to provide everything that he wants to provide for her financially. He brought up the fact that he hears people say that all you need is love in a relationship to make it work. And he thinks that that's bullcrap. So for Caleb, there doesn't really seem to be any issues coming up as far as him and Mariah having like vast personality differences, or there being a prior issue of cheating, or any like trust discrepancies. It seems like he's insecure about himself and what he can provide for her. Aria shares that so when Aria talks about her ultimatum, I like the fact that she acknowledges that she wasn't able to take things to the next level for Scotty or move on to the next step because he wasn't leaving space for her to feel secure. Aria's issue is that in order to marry Scotty, she's going to be the one that's compromising. She's going to be the one who's going to be relocating. And Caleb affirms Aria that she's one of the first people in this experience who's really said, it's not completely my fault that I've been giving this ultimatum. It's not that I don't want to settle down. It's that I'm not being given the space to feel secure enough to do so. So I liked Caleb and Aria together. Caleb's also worried, and this seems to be a running theme because he brings up Mariah's codependence in a speech later, but he's worried about Mariah having such a little gap between relationships and feeling like ultimately there could potentially be a different soulmate out there for her because she's moved on so quickly and to be with him. Now, her experience, because she's with Micah, who ultimately ends up leaving, that's not something that she gets to explore at all. And I think that that's giving Caleb a lot of anxiety during his experience. Like as soon as Micah leaves, I think that adds an extra layer of pressure to Caleb to feel like he can't enjoy himself because Micah's not in the same position. Like it's not like they can both come back and her be like, you know what? I actually found through my partnership that you're lacking a lot of qualities as well. It's really just sort of on him. So I get that, but I also understand how frustrating it would be to be Aria and be partnered with Caleb, who's really not allowing himself to dive into this experience. Now, the couples have a cocktail party after each of them go out on little dates. And again, this is before the choice ceremony, before they're living together, because this is episode 2. And Dave is talking to Mariah. Is it Mariah? Yes. Dave is talking to Mariah right in front of Vanessa and Nick and tells her how everything that she says is so eloquent. And you can tell that Vanessa is like definitely in her cups. And she walks up to Nick and she's like, oh my God, yeah, because like I just feel the same way about you. And maybe he was talking to Chanel. So like, don't quote me. Things start to get blurry when all of them are together. Now, as I said, Vanessa's definitely in her cups and she whispers to Nick, you haven't talked to me tonight. And he says that he has very strong feelings for her, but he feels awkward expressing those feelings in front of others, which honestly would be valid because your partner is right there. However, I think that Nick is very performative, and I actually don't think that he had strong feelings about Vanessa, which we will get to later. Now, I will say initially it seemed like things were going well. At least on her end. Vanessa was having a great time chatting to Dave. And this is chatting to Nick. And this is making Dave spiral. Like Dave is spiraling from the moment that this experience starts. And he realizes that people really aren't that interested in him, but that his girlfriend, Vanessa, actually is interesting. Now, JR is having a conversation with Micah at this cocktail party or at this whatever they're at. And he says that he's never dated a white woman. So Sandy would be his opportunity to be with a white woman, no strings attached, and try that. And immediately I roll my eyes. Because he also made a comment to Micah that he usually dates mixed girls and Aria's Hispanic and Black. So he wants to explore that too. That's kind of what he's used to. And these comments just sort of gave misogynoir. It also, like JR is fetishizing Sandy. She fetishizes him, which we will get to later. But it's just a very weird It's just very weird. We'll say that. I don't like those sentiments. It's very weird. I don't feel like that was respectful at all to Zaina. And there's been people online, shout out to Storytime with Ricky. She said that she doesn't even think that Zaina and JR were together when they first got to this experience. Honestly, now that she said that, I can completely see that. I think that we have heard rumors that some of the Ultimatum couples weren't together and they kind of act like they are, or they had broken up, but they had been like on and off for a period of time. So they were trying things out. I could see that. Dave talks to Vanessa, and this is after he's seen her having a great time with Nick in conversation. And he tells her that this week has been really tough for him. And he's basically now worried that she's going to move on from him. And he doesn't say this, but he was thinking that he was going to be the person in this situation. If anybody was going to catch feelings for someone, Dave thought that it was going to be him. No, 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 Dave. No, 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 Dave. But Vanessa's not interested. Vanessa's like, okay, I think that I'm starting to realize what it's like without you and what you don't have. And, I think that it wouldn't be beneficial for us to just discontinue this experience. Vanessa also says that she's excited for the trial marriage and that she knows exactly who she's going to pick. And this makes Dave spiral even further. He alludes to thinking that he can't handle this experience and maybe he should leave. And I think it's important to point out, and I'm glad I wrote this in my notes, I had a feeling that Dave was going to leave from episode 2. Whether he would leave with Vanessa or whether he would leave by himself, I ultimately knew that Dave is going to leave. Now, there has been word going around about why they left, which we'll get to when we get to that episode. But I just had a feeling that eventually Dave was going to leave. Zaina and Scotty are talking. And I do like this conversation. When Zaina and Scotty talk, they talk about how it's odd because their feelings that they have for their partners are coexisting while they're forming new connections. And I haven't necessarily heard any prior cast members phrase things that way. And I thought that was as a sociology minor, I just thought that was in a psych major. I just thought that was interesting. That is very much what you're doing. You're holding space for the feelings for your partner while also seeing if you can explore a new connection. Also, Zaina and Scotty both feel weird because both of them were the ones who issued ultimatums to their partners in this experience. Now, Aria and JR go on a date, and honestly, their date went pretty well. So I was kind of disappointed that JR didn't pick Aria, but seeing how he moves with Sandy, I'm ultimately glad that he didn't. Now, on their date, she asks him if he's recovered from the infidelity in his prior relationship, because we find out that I believe JR is a pastor's kid and he was married when he was 18 years old. And he says in his words, he's over it. He doesn't think about that anymore. And I think that this was immediately a red flag because that's not healthy. You know what I mean? It's healthy to be over it. Okay. But like that terminology kind of implies that you never went to therapy to actually deal with this and you're more or less not thinking about it. We also hear things that he does in relationships when he ends up coupling up with Sandy later that would lead you to believe that he still very much is thinking about this and is left with trauma from this relationship. Now, I'd be remiss to say that I would love to hear from the ex-wife and if she was actually cheating on him, because for some reason, a lot of guys on reality television say that. Then the ex comes out, she talks online. She's like, that's not at all what was happening. And I'm inclined to believe the women, a good majority of the time. So I like that Aria asked that question as well. I thought that was a very mature question to ask. I think that Aria went into this with pure intentions to actually gain something from this experience. And I think she was looking for an emotional partner because I think that is what she's lacking with Scotty. I think that she often feels misunderstood by Scotty. I think that she wishes that Scotty would have some patience with her and some understanding for her viewpoint. So I think that's what she was looking for in this experience. Now, JR and Sandy go on a date right after, and their date immediately has a lot of sexual innuendos. Now, granted, they're a little bit set up for this because the menus of all the drink titles are like MILF Monster, cat muncher, whatever. I can't even really recall, but something like that. So they're kind of like led in that direction, but they go for it every single time. Now, JR talks about how, oh, and he implies also after reading the drinks that Sandy would be a MILF. So immediately we go there. He also talks about how when he first started his fitness account, he was made fun of. And Sandy replies, only people from the bottom laugh, which apparently really inspires JR. Although I feel like that's something that I could read on the inside of a fortune cookie. Okay, like if we'll just continue. JR is immediately talking about what kind of kisses he likes with Sandy. He likes it sloppy, tongue down the throat. And I'm like, okay, I want to choose my words carefully here because I didn't want to assume that he looks like an F-boy, even though he kind of does, because he's so well groomed and he's so attractive and he's a personal trainer. But we're immediately going into the relationship talking about sexual preferences leans to me more thinking that, like you said to Micah, you're excited to hook up with a white girl, no strings attached, versus actually have something of substance with Sandy. This feels like an opportunity to have a hall pass in your relationship with Zaina if they were still together and very strong. Now, let's see. Oh, yeah. And I made a note about that. I said both of them are definitely probably going to explore things physically. Now, at the choice ceremony, this is where everyone decides who they've connected with based off of these dates and who they would like to pick as a trial husband, trial wife to spend the next 3 weeks together. Each person, as they pick someone, has to make a speech. And in this speech, they are both addressing whom they are choosing to spend the next 3 weeks with and their prior partner. So the speeches can be kind of shady. They can be kind of shady. But Nick arguably has the biggest reaction out of anybody at the table. So we start with Scotty and Zaina, and they ultimately couple up together. He says that he feels like he's still trying to prove who he is to Aria, and after 3 years, she should know. And in Scotty's speech, he also respectfully addresses her ex, JR, and says that any man would be lucky to have her. I thought it was nice he respectfully addressed JR, which is interesting because they later have tension at a party because JR has heard that Scotty thinks he's there for a hall pass. Unfortunately, JR sort of gives reason to think that, although it's unclear if Scotty actually said that. Also, Zaina said a bar without even meaning to, but she was like, Scotty, you embody. And I just kept wanting to tag that one girl on TikTok who makes the songs. Scotty, you embody. Scotty, you embody. That just popped in my head for some reason. But Scotty, you embody lots of traits I look for in a husband. And TBD on that, Zaina, okay, which we'll get into later. Their connection felt like it had the potential to be romantic, but more than anything, it felt to me like because they both issued ultimatums, they were excited to return to their partners and see if they were ready to show up for them. Show up. I feel like we used to hear that phrase all the time, whether in Bachelor or Love is Blind, but show up for them and get married. Ultimately, Mariah couples up with Micah. And in a confessional, Mariah shares that initially she thought that Caleb was the person who needed this experience to get some clarity, but now she's thinking that maybe she's the person who needs it. Unfortunately, we know that Mariah doesn't end up getting that clarity because she ends up moving through this experience alone. Micah says in his trial marriage that they can make each other better individually. And as I stated from the very beginning, Mariah and Michael's coupling up always felt very much platonic to me and just about helping them show up better to their partners if they can teach each other anything. I didn't feel like there was any potential for that to actually be a romantic connection that pulls them away from their prior partner. Chanel couples up with Dave, and this feels like a pity couple because ultimately at the cocktail party, Dave is spiraling so badly about, who Vanessa, what's going on with Vanessa, her talking to Nick, the possibility of her actually having a connection. And she feels so bad for him, she cries. So I'm like, Dave, you're kind of like the party pooper. No offense, I reserve the right to change my mind on this. But Chanel couples up with him. And, Dave doesn't really have much to say about Chanel because they don't know each other that well. Ultimately, this does feel like a pity pick. So he brings up the moment at the cocktail party where Chanel had them both smile at each other. Okay. Chanel says, I think I'll have a lot of fun with you and learn more about myself. But ultimately, Dave just really doesn't seem that fun. So, I don't know. I did enjoy that Micah got emotional and asked Dave to make sure that she's okay, take care of his best friend. That, like I said, really grounded the fact that I think Chanel and Micah actually do like each other. Like out of all of the couples, I think they actually liked each other and were most likely to end up back together. So it was really no surprise that ultimately they end up leaving. JR couples up with Sandy, and mind you, we have gotten through about 3 couples and nobody has had a tantrum or intervened that we saw on camera. Now, JR, before he couples up with Sandy, he does make a speech to acknowledge how deep his conversations with Aria got. And Aria thanks JR for telling her nice things because that's something that she really doesn't hear from her ex. And I'm like, see, that's what I don't like, because it's like you're expected to move and compromise, but if you're not even getting compliments, or feeling like you're being told nice things, like why would you? In Sandy's speech to JR, she says that she feels like they both have the same amount of fire and she's never been with someone who has the same sort of personality as her. So she's curious to see how that will go. Well, Sandy, usually opposites attract for a reason, but I also think that JR is her type. I think that Nick knows that JR is her type. I think that he was very intimidated by JR because he knew this. And I also think that Nick was just giving some sort of microaggressions and odd racial undertones, like just very weird. So he gets upset and he shuts down. Sandy's just said it'll be interesting to see how they get along. And Nick interjects and he says that he's upset that it took him so long to get Sandy to open up. And it seems like she was able to do it quickly with someone else. Mind you, I think that Nick is kind of jumping the gun a little bit here because I'm not sure what gave him that impression, because all we're doing is coupling up right now. And you're next, bro. Like you have to pick next. So but Sandy and him, they immediately get into some sort of squabble and they end up on the topic of eye contact. And she says it's not something she's good at. Well, apparently Nick has been Hawkeye watching Sandy all night because he says, it's something, it seems like it's something that you're good at with him, already. Nick is just draining. I'm so sorry. Nick is just draining. And then he tells Sandy, whether your connection is play or fun, let that be your life. I don't like that. And that's what I mean about the racial undertones. Let that be your life. And then he adds, if she's not ready for a future with someone, go with that. That's twice that he's referenced to JR as that when he knows his name is JR. So it's just giving some sort of, like I said, some sort of microaggression, racial undertones. I don't like how he's speaking to JR. Now, episode 3, because that's the end of episode 2, it ends there. Nick and Sandy get into a squabble, and then, okay, argument has died down a little. JR, it's his turn to make a choice. So he chooses Sandy. I think he says Sandy is so sexy, funny to me, gorgeous, wild side. I'm not sure if he said that in a confessional or at the table, but if he said that at the table, if I was Zaina, that would piss me off. It just would. Sandy said she's never experienced someone similar to her, like I said. And she mentioned, mind you, Sandy has already dove into how different they are and how they come to from different backgrounds so many times. And it's we get it. You're white, he's black. We get it. You don't need to say it that many times. So ultimately, the two fetishizers pick each other, and then it's Nick's turn to pick. Now, both him and Vanessa choose each other. And again, this is interesting because he was just explosive with Sandy over her choice, yet she has no response to who he selected. It just makes me wonder, so they already have an age gap, but it just makes me wonder, who holds the power in that relationship with Nick and Sandy, because it seems like his opinions are supposed to be taken a lot more seriously than hers. And I just don't like the way that he was treating her or him. So basically, like I said, Vanessa and Nick choose each other. Aria chooses Caleb. Continuing on. It's night one. Everybody's just chosen each other. Micah is already really missing Chanel because basically when he got into the apartment, Mariah decides to go to bed early and call the night a wrap. And on one hand, I absolutely don't blame her because it's an emotionally draining day, but I simultaneously don't blame him for feeling completely alone after being with his partner and then being in that experience. Caleb and Aria have a conversation. And like I said, he praised her for admitting that she's not able to move on to the next step because of her partner and not just putting all of the blame on herself. And Sandy and JR have a conversation in bed. This is night one, right after the choice ceremony. And he's talking about, I think, his tattoos and the meaning of them. He mentions that his first name is John, JON. Sandy replies, not JAWN, like Philly John. And, you know, that's the danger of fetishizing white women is you're going to have a lot of ignorant comments like that, especially with one like Sandy who fetishizes black men. So I wasn't surprised that a microaggression was coming. To echo what my comments said, I was surprised that that was what she said, just because I didn't expect that to come out of her mouth. I don't think she would have said that if she was sitting in bed and talking to Nick or Dave. I don't think she would have said, oh, is that Dayve, Dave? I think that she said that because JR is black and I just don't like it. It was very weird. It was a very weird moment. You're a fucking idiot also, JAWN. Okay, Sandy, it's night one, Sandy. It's night one. Night one, Chanel and Micah, 3:30 a.m. comes and they, like Cinderella, turn into a pumpkin unless they see each other. They're out, Ski. They're out. Chanel does tell Dave that she's going to get some fresh air. I think that privately she had maybe texted him that she's going to meet up with Micah because of what happens after. But she comes back in at 8:30 a.m., so gone for 5 hours. And we don't learn what happens yet because episode 4 starts and it's Sandy talking to, oh no, it's Nick talking to Vanessa. And first we hear his perspective. And he says that he saw Sandy getting coffee and she just tells him that her and JR have kissed. He makes that sound like Sandy just gave this information unprompted, unprovoked, walked up to him. Hey, me and JR are kissing, just so you know. No. Okay, that's not what happened because Sandy gets back to the apartment and tells JR that Nick saw her at Starbucks. He was emotional, upset, asking for details, asking if they kissed. So she answered yes and honestly. Now, JR had a premonition that this would cause a shitstorm, and he was absolutely right. Sandy says that it feels like borderline harassment with Nick calling and blowing her up 100 times in a row. And it's like, I do agree. It is concerning how many times he's calling her. It's also concerning because why are you trying to dictate what her experience is? If you were kissing Vanessa, would you answer her calls 100 times or would you find that concerning? I don't know. So Nick comes back to his apartment after all of this happens and checks for Vanessa to find out all of her things are gone. Now, because Dave is implying on Instagram that Vanessa left because of Nick and how things were going with them behind closed doors. And then we later see Nick feral on his couch. I would not be surprised if he was already absolutely losing it over the fact that finding out that Sandy and JR kissed at Starbucks. And if Vanessa was probably a little bit either nervous for her safety or just drained being with him, or in just complete realization that there's no shot of them actually having a connection because he's feeling very either possessive or let's just say possessive over his ex. Very, very much obsessed and wanting to know everything that she's doing. So Nick comes back to his apartment, checks for Vanessa's things, and they're gone. Mariah comes back from the mall and all of Micah's things are gone, including the book he lent her, which I mean, that part did suck. I'm like, oh, now she doesn't even have a book to read. I did feel bad about the book, but I also get it because I would take my book. I would also take my book. I think I would leave a note to Mariah. You know, she's sweet, but I also understand just getting the fuck out of there because maybe they were trying to dodge producers and the production team. Let's see. So yeah, Neither Vanessa, Dave, Chanel, nor Micah said anything to their partners before they left. We see Dave, Vanessa, Nick, and Chanel pack their things live. And this was actually so funny because they've compiled a montage, like anything they could pull from this so that we as the viewers know what's happening. And they're, first of all, they're treating them like criminals. Second of all, it's hilarious that Dave takes the camera and then angles it inside of the shelf so they specifically can't watch them further. I just felt like, I know that a lot of people would have liked to see that moment more and the cameras follow them. But as someone who's watched so much reality TV and has seen producers be so evil and so malicious with how they produce certain scenes, I was actually glad that they were deprived of that. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, because you guys have a toxic ass experience. We have no idea what this is. Now, maybe they know they're going on the ultimatum, maybe they don't. In a lot of shows, you don't know exactly what experience you're signing up for. I don't know. I'm going to ask when I interview someone. So Caleb feels bad for Mariah that she was left alone, knowing how she handles being alone. And it's like, I do understand that because again, these aren't really their exes. These are people that they're going back to and have a very serious connection to. But simultaneously, that sucks for their partner. I felt bad for Aria. Now, Sandy is pissed that Vanessa left Nick alone. And I feel like she's mainly pissed because she knows that Nick is going to be more in her business. I don't think that Sandy wants to go back with Nick. If she marries Nick, fine. It'll give Roxanne and Antonio from the season before, where I will never say that you guys should be together. It's just not going to happen. So Nick and Mariah end up meeting up and ultimately discussing their surprise at coming home to finding out that they're alone in this experience. And it was interesting to me that immediately they weren't just paired together to go through this experience. Granted, I guess they didn't choose each other, so it's kind of like that might feel even worse. But I thought it was telling that Mariah would rather be alone than be with Nick. I thought that was telling because I think Nick would accept anybody's company, if I'm honest. Now, Caleb and Aria go on a date, and he talks about how he keeps hearing Mariah use the term blind faith. And she questions him as to what that means. And he says that Mariah says that she puts blind faith as to why she loves Caleb because there's really no specific reason, that she knows he's the one. Like, she just believes he's the one. Caleb, I wonder what his sign is. I feel like he's an earth sign. He seems very logical. And Mariah seems very much like wears her heart on her sleeve and her feelings. And maybe she does jump from relationship to relationship, but I think that her feelings are very pure for Caleb. Aria tells Caleb that her parents divorced. So this was interesting. We got to learn more about Aria in this situation, that her parents divorced when she was a freshman in high school. While she was applying for FAFSA, her mom just let her know, yeah, me and your dad are getting divorced. But when she was younger, she remembers that they had an open relationship for a while. So she remembers seeing women around. So, and Caleb is not judgmental, which why you shouldn't be anyways, but he's not judgmental. And he leaves a lot of space for her to just articulate her whole story without being interrupted, which I really like of Caleb. I guess even if they wouldn't be romantic partners, Caleb would be a good friend. But I just wish there were more people who acted like Caleb because I haven't seen very many men leave that much space for the woman that they're dating or friends with. Continuing on. Okay, so we just get that cute date with Caleb and Aria, and then we switch right over. It's like abrupt to Sandy and JR going bowling with more innuendos. She's wearing her little crop top, cargo pants, body chain. And that whatever. JR talks about how he's going to bring a scale to dinner and weigh his food. This, rightfully kind of gives Sandy the ick because why? I think I would have responded to that and asked if he was planning on weighing my food though, because that's what I would care about the most. Are you going to be weighing my food and care about what I'm eating? Because if you are, that's going to be a huge problem. And if not, then I guess we just can continue on and I'll ignore your weird scale. But This shows that he's very rigid in some of the things that he does in his lifestyle. I get it. He's a personal trainer, but there's still a lot of rigidity there. Let's see. It's interesting that Caleb on his date with Arya compared Mariah's love for him almost comparable to a mother's love for her child because it's so what is that word? What's the unconditional? Because Mariah's love is so unconditional. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I would be really interested to hear what a therapist thinks of that, and if women are if we're overextending ourselves when men feel that way. But I will say Caleb has a lot of wisdom, and I like how in the same conversation he told Arya that every time Scotty does something nice for her, it's not really her job to reassure him that he's doing the right thing just because he's doing small acts of service. Thank you, Caleb, because I needed that reminder as well, and I didn't even know it. Sandy and JR have dinner on their balcony, and who's looking at them? Who's watching in the window? Nick. Nick. He's watching at the window. And according to them, we never see this. He is staring right at them. So Sandy awkwardly gets up, avoids eye contact, acts like she doesn't know him, and grabs herself a glass of wine. Shout out again, story time with Ricky. She talked about how Sandy's just kind of doing too much. And at this point, I agree. Why are you acting like you don't know him? Okay. I don't even like Nick. I think he's very manipulative, but you're acting like you don't know him. It is inappropriate for him to be out there and just staring, but perhaps just say, hey, like this feels a little invasive, like, do you want us to go inside? Were you sitting out here? Can you go inside? Like, I don't know, like maybe perhaps just acknowledging that they're a person and that you're going to go back to them, because it's fully like Sandy and JR are like, I can't stand that Sandy tells Zaina that her and JR aren't acting like they're in a relationship, because they very much are. She's acting like her and Nick are not together, aren't getting back together, and like her and JR are together. So that's wrong. Back at Arya and Caleb's, because they're one of the only things that bring joy throughout this series. They're doing a self-care night, and this was really cute. Arya set this up, and Caleb's complimenting how much care she gives, and if she's able to give this much care during this experience, that he can't really even imagine what it's like to date her or to someday marry her. This was so cute. They do facials, they're rubbing each other's skin. Love a night like this. He's wearing her headband. I like how soft with Arya Caleb is. I like that. Anyways, Sandy and Jay, I can't all be cute and fluffy and chubby bunny, because Sandy and Jay are at the pool connecting with further innuendos, which ends up kind of implying that he doesn't know what she tastes like. We don't know if they hook up or if they just really like to have a flirtatious conversation. Cue episode 5. Arya and Caleb are back being cute again. Back being cute again. They have a fire together, and like I said, here comes Chubby Bunny. I forgot about this game. Also, the marshmallows they used were way too fucking big to play this game. I was definitely worried about choking. Do they have someone on a standby? But it's the game where you take the marshmallows, shove them in your mouth, and try to say Chubby Bunny as your cheeks are full. This was cute. Again, I like the fact that Caleb is soft. I like the fact that he's open to virtually all of the activities that Arya plans for them. I also like the fact that he's, being affectionate. He was holding her hands, rubbing her hands. Mind you, this is before Caleb makes the comments he makes later in this episode, which do piss me off. But initially, I was just really liking him. I think it's interesting that JR meets Sandy's family, especially since not everybody in their couples met families. So it's interesting that only Sandy did that. And if everybody met families, it's interesting they didn't show us that. And that they just showed Sandy, but it makes you wonder if she thought that her and JR were definitely going to end up together after the experience, or why the fuck they met up. But anyways, her family meets JR, and the women in her family, they act like they fetishize JR in the same way that she does. Her mom can't stop touching him, talking about his physique, grabbing his muscles. It's very weird. JR also tells them that it was love at first sight and that him and Sandy have so much in common. is the comment in the room with us. I don't know. Sandy's family asks if they're leaving together as a couple, which makes me think that they really don't like Nick because they're really willing to, they're like, Nick who? Nick who? What? So when Nick finds out, speaking of Nick, when he finds out that Sandy took JR to meet her parents, he absolutely cried in fetal position on the couch at 3 a.m. and called Sandy over and over again, asking why she's punishing him. Now, people on TikTok felt that I was being too cruel and unkind when I was talking about Nick. But let me be very clear. I think that what Nick was doing was very performative, and I think it was manipulative. I think that the volatility and the level to which he was expressing his emotions was to try to achieve having Sandy come back to him before she was ready in this experience. And and like I said, I think Sandy and Jay are unserious people, but so is Nick, because I guess he's 38. Let's get the ages right, because I've been getting them wrong. And Sandy's 27. Maybe she's 28. You have a 10-year age gap. You started dating 3 years ago. So when you were 35 and she was 25, the fact that you felt like you had something in common with someone 10 years younger than you while you're living in Los Angeles tells me that you are a very unserious person. Then the fact that she's been there half the time as you and you want to take her away to the lake tells me again that you're a very unserious person. He also talks about how he wants someone for his quirkiness, and yet it really kind of looks like he wants a trophy wife. So I think, again, if he was sitting there and crying by himself, I'm not going to judge him. I always appreciate men having vulnerability. The issue is he had a theatrical crying spell, and maybe, and this is fair, maybe I project personal experience of both myself, friends, people I know. I've never seen someone do that and that not be performative. Blink Twice is coming to mind. Not comparing Nick with that type of person or being an abuser. I'm just saying that it's usually men who are being manipulative. And I feel like he uses his emotions to be manipulative. And because he is an artist and says he is emotional and kind of broody, I would wonder how often this happens. I would wonder. Now, I'll walk all of this back and I'll apologize for my feelings if other news comes out. But calling Sandy while crying at 3 a.m. and asking why she's punishing him when he can't self-soothe his emotions. I understand he's alone, but he's victimizing himself over and over. Mariah is alone too. You're not the only person in this experience. She isn't putting all of this on her partner, Caleb. It shows very little emotional regulation. And it's, again, concerning. Okay? It's concerning. So he can't stop there, though. He ends up going over to the apartment and he knocks on the door. I don't know if producers told him. I don't know how he found out where they lived. As JR says, that's concerning. He shows up. Let me add, though, again, to echo what Storytime with Ricky said, Sandy's doing too much. Like, bro, she doesn't want to talk to you. You're embarrassing yourself. And Sandy's saying, like, we aren't doing this. I feel violated. Like, on one hand, yes, he's coming into your personal space. And if he's coming at 3 a.m., that's inappropriate. Okay. On the other hand, it's very much giving, I'm with him now. You figure this out. And it's like, I understand that she's upset that he brought her here and that she probably has a lot of resentment towards Nick. But then honestly, just tell him we're not together. I don't really know what the solution is, but it doesn't give that she cares about her partner and wants to get back together. And it also doesn't give that Nick cares about his partner, the fact that he put her in that position. Because why are you showing up at 3 a.m., unable to control yourself? It's just, get yourself together. Get yourself together. I just don't think that Sandy should have acted. I don't know. Who knows? Tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me what you think in the chat. It's like, I kind of see both sides, but more than anything, Nick, why are you there? Like I said, I think it's concerning, but Sandy also, You're acting brand new and like you don't know this guy. Next day, Nick and Mariah go to an exercise class together and they talk about how hard it's been for them to cope and be alone this week. Nick tells Mariah how JR was standing right in front of Sandy and talking shit to him as if it was his girl. I don't perceive that as the reality of the situation. And I think that Nick being so angry about the situation and having the opinion that he was talking shit to him, or it's just kind of the verbiage again, that racial undertone, that weird microaggression that he's had with JR since the very beginning. Mariah tries to relate to Nick and she says, I saw Caleb and Aria on their dates in my line of sight. It made me feel awkward, but what she didn't do was sit out there longer and stare at them or then fetal position cry at 3 a.m. and call Caleb. That's not what happened. Now, side note, I forgot to mention this, but earlier on a date that Sandy and JR went on, he mentioned that he doesn't want to know his partner's passcodes because he caught his ex cheating on her phone. So he doesn't want to know what's going on in his partner's phones. It's like out of sight, out of mind. I'd rather be ignorance is bliss type thing. Again, that echoes that he is not healed and he still is thinking about what happened with his ex, despite his perception of it and what he said about it. Let's see. Okay, Aria has a conversation with Caleb, and at first I was wondering why she would ever want to have a conversation with Mariah that talks about her experience with Caleb and how close they're getting. Then I realized, okay, there's a girls' night happening tonight. Everybody's going to check in with each other and kiki, so she wants to be honest. So she says, I want to tell her. I just want to be honest. We have a deep emotional connection. And Caleb says, I probably wouldn't use those words, deep emotional connection. And in a confessional, we hear him say that Aria is the last person Mariah would want to hear from or get details from the experience on, and that she needs to leave that up to him. And on one hand, Caleb, I understand. On another hand, you want to downplay it. You want to control the narrative. And when she does watch it back, as Aria said, it will feel as if you were being not truthful and controlling the narrative. And if there weren't trust issues before, this perhaps could cause them. Because in my opinion, it's better to be honest. We also learn that the area that he's lacking with Mariah is that emotional connection and is that deep emotional connection. So she probably doesn't want to affirm her fears, which on one hand is respectful, but it's actually not kind to lie to someone. It's not kind to lie to someone. Granted, he probably wants to be there when that's explained. But you know what, Caleb, as you see when you go on your guys' night with Scotty, telling someone a truth and beating around the bush and not honoring your experience doesn't go over well. No one wants to be spoon-fed bullshit, to be honest. So it kind of annoyed me that he said that. It's also like, I wouldn't have even asked him. I'm not going to ask for your permission to have a conversation when you're not there. We aren't together right now. We're in a trial marriage and I'm still going to tell my experience. It's my experience. If she wants to ask you how you perceive it, she will. But if she wants to ask me how I perceive it, I perceive that we've gotten very emotionally deep together. So that did annoy me. -1 for Gryffindor, -1 for you, Caleb. No. Let's see. Okay, Zaina and Scotty sit together and attempt to plan dates, but it goes south. It goes south. Scotty suggests cryotherapy and jumping out of a plane. To be honest, neither of which sound fun to me either. Why do we have to have the most extreme dates? # what about a movie? Can we go see Wicked? Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to do that? We hear that Mariah was able to go to the mall. Why can't we go to the mall? Why can't we go to the park? Okay. So I don't blame her for not wanting to do those dates. Those are very like polarizing dates. It's not just like, do you want to go get something to eat? Do you want to get dinner? No, like, do you want to suit up, jump out of an airplane, potentially hurt yourself, face your fear of heights, do this with me? No. Do you want to get naked and have your titties blasted with freezing air and nitrogen? No. No. So this conversation spirals anyways, and Scotty's upset with Zaina for rejecting his date ideas. And he's like, it kind of feels like you're disgusted. And it's like, maybe I fucking am. Why is that so offensive to you? Did you invent cryotherapy? Excuse me? Did you invent cryotherapy? Did you invent jumping out of an airplane? Why? What if it did disgust me? It does disgust me. In fact, it did disgust me that you think I would jump out of a plane because no, I don't want to. Like, maybe I just don't want to. So that's my perception of that. But then it spirals into even further, like not only is he upset that she rejected his date ideas, but now he's upset that she is eating. Okay. Now he's upset that she's eating. He doesn't want a partner who wakes up and eats without him. So the whole world revolves around Scotty, right? The whole world revolves around Scotty. And I'm getting a glimpse into what Aria may be in reference to. At the girls' night out, Mariah tells Sandy that Nick feels triggered and maybe not good enough. And, let me give her props. She tries to give Nick grace and she tries to explain his feelings, as I did. But ultimately, Nick seems immature and unable to emotionally regulate himself. So not much to say. She voices that Nick is pouring himself into art and she sees that as escapism more than coping. Jury's out on that. I do think that's debatable. If that's how he's able to express emotion. Some people feel like creating music helps them express their emotion. Some people feel like creating helps them express. Let me stand up for Nick there. I think he could be expressing his emotions versus escaping. But Sandy's disgusted by this. She's like, he's painting? He's painting? Go back to fetal position crying. And even there, Sandy, like, I disagree with you. Mariah's like, you know what? I'm sorry, but I don't think he would make a great husband. And I'm so sorry if that offends you. And it's just hilarious. It's just hilarious because told you. So what? Mariah can figure it out in a couple days and we can't after 5 episodes? Give me a fucking break. Again, I'll apologize if I'm wrong, but I don't feel bad for saying what I've said. Sandy talks to Zaina and lies right to her face and tells her that her and Jay are not hooking up. They're not dating for real. All she's trying to do is train him to be better for her. But you don't know me, bitch. You don't know what I like. You don't know my expectations. You don't know what goals we were sharing together to try to reach in the future. What do you mean? What do you mean? Don't. Because anything you teach him, train him is probably going to be wrong. Okay? It's probably going to be wrong. So I didn't like that. And you're fucking lying to her face. You guys have definitely seemed like you're in a relationship. He met your family. You guys said it was love at first sight. You've been kissing. Don't fucking piss me off. He was carrying you out of the water all around the pool. I roll. If Zaina doesn't really care that much about her relationship with JR, then okay, let it slide. But like that would really make me mad, Sandy, because nobody told you to fucking give me those details. And I don't think Zaina strikes me as a person who you need to be dishonest with. So you really pissed me off with that. Zaina's issue with JR is he does not vocalize that she has wifey qualities, that she has good qualities to get married. Meanwhile, he's validating and confirming that Sandy does after barely knowing her. Hold on. Okay. Where was I? Okay, yeah, so Sandy just lied in Zaina's face. Then Aria has a conversation with Mariah, and she says that she basically speaks for Caleb, which is exactly what he asked her to not do. But she, wants to share her experience. And she says that Caleb doesn't feel trusted based on their communication. And she references that every time Caleb's taken a trip, he has to over communicate with Mariah the entire time. Now, Mariah feels like a little confused about this because in her mind, being communicative was a healthy part of their relationship. So this kind of shocks her. I feel a little bit bad for Mariah here because I guess I see Caleb's point a little bit about him wanting to be the one to explain things, because that caveat I don't think was necessary for Aria to share. But the next thing she talks about, which is her connection with Caleb being emotional, I think that was important to share. That's her experience, that's her truth. And that's when Mariah tells her, like, that's where we're not doing so well. And I think that that's what Caleb left out when he had his conversation with Aria, because I don't think that he wanted to put Mariah on blast and just say what her insecurities are. Out of everybody, Caleb's moving the most respectful out of everyone. I'm going to hop on later so that I can review the boys' night out and give my predictions for the rest of the season. Let me know in the comments what all of you were thinking about these last 3 episodes. Let me know if you think any of the other couples who were together in the beginning will get back together, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.